Okay. Good morning, everyone. Give me a second. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are still there. We are supposed to meet about 15 minutes before, but if you are still there, let's continue. The title of today's presentation is Blended Course Offering by US Faculty in Vietnam, Potential Model for India. And my name is Professor Rav Vemuri from the University of California, Davis. This is going to be an informal presentation, more or less like a chat. And I encourage you to ask questions. Let me try to just first introduce you to the country of Vietnam. That's the first part of the presentation. Then I will tell you how it happened that I ended up teaching in Vietnam. And then I will give you, based on your interest, outline of the two courses that I taught just last year. Okay, you can feel free to ask questions through the organizer, and he will forward the questions to me. Okay, first I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction to Vietnam. It has nothing to do with the technical content of this presentation. Okay, and those of you who do not know much about this country, this is a chance to know about it. But about 15-20 years ago, Vietnam was in the news almost every day. But if you are young, you probably are not familiar with what happened in Vietnam. But anyway, let me give you a brief introduction to Vietnam. Like India, Vietnamese had to fight several wars with invading armies and colonial powers. So there is some similarity between India and Vietnam from that point of view. They fought the French and defeated them at a place called Dien Bien Phu in North Vietnam. It is a very famous battle. After this battle, the French were driven out of Vietnam, and then in their place, the Americans entered. And then that means North Vietnam, fought with the United States for almost 13 years and defeated the United States. This is a significant event in history because this is probably the first time United States faced a definite defeat, whereas in Korea it was kind of a draw. We are not sure who won in Korea, but in Vietnam it is definitely North Vietnam that won this war. Okay, surprisingly, now United States is helping the Vietnamese people to rebuild their country, because this is one advantage of fighting with America and losing or winning, whatever it is. They come back to help you. Okay, and my visit to Vietnam is a part of this process of helping Vietnam rebuild their country. Okay, that is the background. I will tell you more about this later on. For those of you who are rusty with the geography of this world, I am showing you a picture of Vietnam, Southeast Asia here. You can see Burma there. Then you can see Thailand. You can see Laos and Cambodia. Approximately, if you are going from west to east, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and then the easternmost part is Vietnam. It's a narrow country stretching along the coast of the South China Sea, and the southernmost tip of Vietnam more or less coincides with the southernmost tip of India. The northernmost tip of Vietnam more or less coincides with the location where Calcutta is located approximately. That gives you a relative idea of where Vietnam is. Okay, I will show you a couple of more pictures of Vietnam. So you will see once again clearly here where Burma is, where Laos is, were Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Okay, toward the bottom of Vietnam is a city called Saigon, way at the bottom near the delta, and almost at the top is the capital of Vietnam, which is called Hanoi. Okay, and it's a very narrow country. At places, the width of the country is not more than about 20 or 30 miles. Okay, and but it's a long country. That is roughly the shape of Vietnam. And I'll give you a little bit about the demographics of this country so you know what we are talking about. Vietnam literally means southern country. That means to the Chinese, they used to call Vietnam southern country. In other words, in India, we call this kind of a country Dakshinapatham, that is South India. Okay, literally Vietnam means Dakshinapatham, or southern part of the country. Okay, the people of Vietnam are of Tibeto-Burman, Polynesian, and Chinese stock. They look like a combination of Burmese, Polynesian, and Chinese people. They don't look like Indians, although there is quite a bit of Indian influence in this country. Most of the Vietnamese do not claim a religion, but you do find Buddhists and Christians who observe their religion, but each of them is a minority. About 8% of the population Buddhists, 8% of the population claim to be Christians, and the remaining people do not claim any religion. Okay. And most of the Vietnamese that I saw are very young. Most of them are post-war generation. By post-war, I do not mean post-World War II. Post-war means after the Vietnam War was over. Most of the people that I met were people who were born after that war was over. So they really don't have much of memories of the war that country fought with America, and therefore they don't have much of a hatred for Americans. As a matter of fact, I did not find any level of hatred or dislike for Americans, although America bombed that country almost to the Stone Age. Okay. In terms of people, most of the Vietnamese are small in stature and lean in build. I never found a fat Vietnamese person. Okay. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, they eat very little sweets compared to Indians who gobble up tons and tons of sweets. Vietnamese very rarely eat sweets. Even at the end of a meal, they don't eat a dessert, just like Indians and Americans do. Okay. And the only Asian country that adapted the Roman script for their language. Most of the Asian languages use our own script. But in Vietnamese, if you see how they write, you see their lettering similar to English. So you can read the letters, but you can't understand them because you don't know what they mean. Okay? So that is about the demographics of this country. And now I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. These are the street sceneries. I just want you to feel how it would be like if you step down from your hotel room onto the street and try to cross the street. Okay, that is a bunch of people on motorcycles waiting at a traffic signal, trying to cross the street. Okay, this is another scene in a different angle. The previous thing, the camera was in front of the motorcycles. This is on the side. Can you see the people are packed like fish in a tuna can? There are so many motorcycles, you cannot believe that they come like waves at a ocean beach. Look at that. The number of people on the street, and almost all of them are on a motorcycle. There are cars there, but the motorcycles dominate the scene. Okay. Another street scene. And if you cannot see their faces, but most of them are relatively young people. You don't see even middle-aged people in Vietnam. Most of them are young because most of the middle-aged people and old people were killed during the war, and so whatever you are seeing is the post-war generation. Another street scene, and it reminds me of street scene in India where somebody is carrying furniture on a cycle. Okay, so this is from the back. Okay, switching to the countryside, they have a lot of monuments, and you will be surprised that every monument I am showing you here, the historical ruins, were temples and palaces built by Hindu kings who ruled Vietnam until the middle 1800s, starting from the 6th century AD until something like 1800s. Indian kings ruled portions of Vietnam, and when they ruled, they built these temples. You can see Sanskrit slokas on these temples, but if you ask the Vietnamese people anything about these things, they know nothing about it, although it was only 1800. That means less than 2 centuries old. Okay, I'll just flip these things to you. These are all ruins of temples, Hindu temples. Here I will pause for a moment. You can see some of the pictures of people standing in the statues standing in the thing. This typical door that you see is very similar to the doors you will find in front of Hindu temples in India. Okay, and then I'm going to show you a few beaches. You think Goa has beautiful beaches, you have to come to Vietnam. The beaches are pristine, clean, wide, and tremendously beautiful. In other words, if somebody has money to go and live here, these are much better and much more beautiful beaches than you find in Goa, for example. Another beach. Okay, so that is a little background about Vietnam for those of you who are curious to know a little bit about it. Actually, after coming, I spent about maybe a month or month and a half physically living in Vietnam on 3 different occasions, and I wrote my experiences about my stay there, but I cannot tell all of that to you here. But now let us begin and talk about the purpose of this talk. Okay, so far what you have listened is like some cultural background, even if you don't care for that, the real thing is starting now. Okay, how it got started. There is an outfit called Vietnam Educational Foundation. This was funded by the United States State Department. Okay, the reason why United States State Department funded this agency is because Americans felt guilty after the war was over for the destruction they caused to this country. So they started helping them by giving them some money and putting together various things, and Vietnam Educational Foundation is one of those things where they are trying to help the Vietnamese educational system to catch up with what is happening in the rest of the world. So this educational foundation in 2013, just a year and a half ago, hired 6 instructors, American instructors, to teach classes to students in Vietnam. I am one of those 6. Okay. The courses must be from the host college curriculum. That means whatever we teach, this is a course that is in their catalog, in their curriculum. That means this is the course they would have wanted to teach rather than something I wanted to teach. Okay, and the classes should be taught at regularly scheduled class times. Okay, in other words, if their class time starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and goes until 10:30, then I have to teach that class from 9 to 10:30 Vietnamese time. If it is 10 to 11:30, I have to teach it from 10 to 11:30 Vietnamese time. That means we end up teaching at night, like just I am doing now. Right now, in the United States, it is almost 10 o'clock at night. And it is probably something like 9 o'clock or something for you. I don't know exactly what it is, but so we have to teach it at a time that is convenient for Vietnam, not convenient for me. And the commitment is either to teach a semester or a full year. I taught for a whole year. Okay, that means I taught 2 semesters, 1 course each semester. Okay, each course or each class has 90-minute duration. That means in a regular semester, the class meets 2 times a week. Each time the class meets 90 minutes. So I have to teach those 90 minutes. That is the nature of this arrangement. Okay. To prepare for this thing, the Vietnam Educational Foundation invited the 6 of us to Washington, D.C. and briefed us about Vietnam. That means they wanted to make sure all of us know something about Vietnam. Just like I told you a little bit about Vietnam, they told us quite a bit more about the country, about the people, and what to expect there, what kind of food, what kind of various things. They wanted to make sure that we go there knowing what it is and how to behave ourselves, how to handle ourselves, and this kind of thing. Okay. Then they asked us to present our plans so that the Educational Foundation wanted to see what exactly we are going to do there. So we prepared material and told them this is what we wanted to do. For example, how we intend to conduct the class, what notes and textbooks we want to use, what tools and technologies we intend to use. What do I mean by tools and technologies? Right now, for example, I am using a webinar as a mechanism to talk to you. Similarly, the Vietnam Educational Foundation wanted to know how we are going to teach this course while we are in the United States. We are in the United States and the students are in Vietnam. How are we going to do this? Is it by Vietnam? Is it by webinars? Is it by some kind of a teleconferencing links? You know, there are so many techniques that are available. They wanted to make sure the technology we are going to use, and they wanted to make sure the technology is available on both sides, that means in the United States and in Vietnam, and they want to make sure that the university that is receiving this course has the proper infrastructure, the bandwidth, internet connectivity, the technical support, all these things. They wanted to go through step by step everything to make sure that we know what we are doing and the Vietnamese know what they are doing, and in Washington the Educational Foundation knows what we are doing. Okay, we spent a couple of days in Washington to go through this process. Okay, and also they wanted to know if we intend to combine our local students with the remote students. That means, suppose I'm teaching a class in the United States at night. For example, if I'm meeting my students from 9 to 10:30 at night in the United States, and the Vietnamese students are sitting in their class between 9 and 10:30 in the morning, then the government wants to know, am I going to give my lecture in front of my students in the United States, and also at the same time the students in Vietnam are listening, or what? If there is a time difference, how are we going to do this? Is it a synchronous presentation or asynchronous presentation? All these things. The reason is America has 4 time zones. So sometimes what is feasible in California may not be feasible in New York. For example, right now it is 1 o'clock at night in New York. So it is not possible for somebody sitting in New York to deliver a lecture for students in India who are sitting in their class at 10 o'clock in the morning, unless that instructor is willing to give a lecture at 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so these are some of the considerations the government wanted to know. Then, how are we going to do this? The government wanted us, regardless of how we teach this course, the Vietnamese Educational Foundation wanted us to physically go to Vietnam, spend at least a week looking at the facilities there, talking to the people there, meeting the students, and get to know what the situation is, then come back to our homes and teach the class from our own classrooms or from our own homes. That is what the government wanted to do. Okay, but the government gave us the freedom to make modifications to that general procedure. So what is the idea of this? So we get to know the Vietnamese campus, we meet the administrators in Vietnam, we inspect the classroom and facilities there. So we are not surprised if their facilities are not comparable to ours. Then we have to know that. Then we are supposed to team up with a local instructor. That means a Vietnamese instructor sits in the classroom in Vietnam while we teach the classes from the United States. It is not just we are teaching it and nobody is there to watch them. The instructor is there all the time in the classroom while we are teaching from here. Our lessons are projected on a big screen so that students can see, just like a professor is writing on a blackboard. Okay, the local instructor is there. If the students have questions, they ask the local instructor, and the local instructor transmits that question via Skype. And I have two computers on my desk at home, and on one desk I have Skype opened. I monitor the Skype so that I can see if there are any questions coming, and on the other computer I have my PowerPoint slides and so on and so forth. Okay, so all of this thing is well planned, but in my case what I did was I decided to stay in Vietnam for 3 weeks, and I actually delivered my lectures in front of the Vietnamese students in Vietnamese classroom for 3 weeks rather than just go there for a week, get to know their facilities and come back. The reason is I wanted to get to know the students, get to know, at least see their face, talk to them, they get to understand their name, you know, and they get to see me, chat with me and so forth. During those 3 weeks, I met the class 2 times a week. I gave them homework, I collected the homework, I graded the homework just like I do it in my class in the United States. And then I came back home and continued my lectures just like I'm talking to you now in India. Okay, that means I used webinars, the same tool, and using IUCEE, Indo-US Collaboration for Engineering Education, helped me to coordinate this process. So everything else I did with Vietnam is exactly the same as what I'm doing with you now, except in the beginning of each semester, I went to Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon, stayed there in a hotel, and went to the class, gave the lectures, and got to know the teachers, got to know the administrators, and got to know the Vietnamese people, and so on and so forth. That is the basic thing. And class preparation, how did I prepare for this? Again, this thing is because the students are remote, I wanted to make sure that the students are given every possible material they possibly need. So well before the class, I prepared written class notes. This written class notes is like notes, you know, in equations, like a small mini textbook. Think of it like a mini textbook with diagrams, equations, and everything. I created PDF files of this, and I placed them in the class website before the semester started. The entire course material was prepared. I placed it there. The reason I did that was, if I prescribed a textbook, I would have prescribed a textbook that I normally use in the United States. Those textbooks cost about $150 to $200 a copy, and Vietnamese students cannot afford to buy those textbooks. I know that, and it's possibly true that Indian students also cannot afford to buy that expensive books. So I thought, instead of bothering them, asking them to buy a book, what I did was I prepared the class notes and placed them as PDF files. Then I also prepared PowerPoint slides, which are based on the class notes, but with a lot more diagrams and you know, it does, there is a difference between PowerPoint slides and class notes. So I prepared the class notes as PowerPoint slides, and I used to place the PowerPoint slides at least 24 hours before the class started. So the students have a chance to look at the notes and look at my PowerPoint slides before they come to the class. And I also did another thing. I purchased several copies of the well-known books in the subject matter I was teaching. I was teaching machine learning, and I usually have some of my favorite books I refer to when I prepare my lecture. What I did was I purchased 2 or 3 copies of the books that I normally use at home, and I carried all the copies and gave it to them as a gift. I said, put these books in your library, so if you do not understand something I'm telling, I'm basically I prepared my notes by looking at these books, so you can go back to the books and read those books. So I gave them several sources of information: textbooks, class notes, and PowerPoint slides. And one more thing I did, actually I did this for several schools in India, where every time I visited India, is I had bookshelves that so many shelves of textbooks that I accumulated over my career, and I was running out of space to carry those books in my office. So every time I go to India or every time I go to Vietnam, I fill a suitcase full of these things and give them as gift to whomever I visit. Like last time I visited Vagdevi College in Warangal, I gave them about 2 or 3 suitcases worth of books. I gave them a suitcase of books to NIT Warangal, National Institute of Technology, and like that. So this time I gave a bunch of books to the Vietnamese students also. Okay, that is preparation for the class. Okay, how did the webinar presentation go? As I told you, most of the lectures were like webinars, just like the webinars you are listening to me now. Okay, and each webinar is 90 minutes, and it's not easy to sit down. And actually, it is not easy to sit down in a class when the instructor is in front of you and listen to him. It is so easy to fall asleep when the instructor is talking. Okay, imagine if the instructor is not there, you are looking at a screen, it is even more boring and more tiring to do that. So what I did was I divided my webinar, that 90-minute webinar, into 3 30-minute modules. That means I divided them into 3 pieces. Each module talks about a small topic, and after that module is over, I take a 5-minute break. Okay, and during that 5-minute break, the students in Vietnam can discuss among themselves if they have any doubts about the material that I presented. And if they feel that something is not clear, or if they have some question, they pose that question to the local instructor. The local instructor will then send that question to me via Skype. I look at the question, I answer the question, and make sure all the students at least follow that 30 minutes. At the end of those 30 minutes, sometimes I put a small multiple choice quiz. Very simple quiz. It is not at all a complicated thing. But the idea of the quiz is, if people are falling asleep, the best way to wake you up is to say, look, I'm going to ask you a question, please answer this. And so the students will wake up, answer the question, and then I'll tell what the correct answer is. So the idea of the question is not so much to test them, but just to break the monotony of the class. Okay, and okay, after this, monitoring. How do you monitor the class? I already told you my Vietnamese counterpart. This counterpart is a junior lecturer with a master's degree, and in this particular case she is a woman. So she sat in the classroom with her own computer connected to my standby computer via Skype. Okay, I knew her because when I visited Vietnam, I used to spend almost every day a couple of hours with her. So she knows me, I know her, and if there are problems of in language, accent, and so forth, this familiarity more or less removed the difficulty. Okay. Then the lady was sitting there. The webinar was delivered via GoToMeeting and continually monitored by IUCEE personnel from Hyderabad. Just like this webinar is being monitored by in Hyderabad. So the same procedure. Okay. So the nice thing about this is they have physically an instructor sitting in front of them to whom they can go to for things. This particular instructor is really not an expert in this topic, but if she has a question, she can always call me after the class is over. We can discuss this material and then she can transmit the answer to the students. Okay, that was the idea. Okay, homeworks and examinations. I assigned regular homework just like I normally assign it to my students in the United States, and typically the homeworks involve doing problems using paper and pencil and some programming assignments. Typically these are not very complicated programming assignments. They are simple enough. They can do them using either MATLAB or C language or whatever. Okay, and I gave the solutions to all the problems to the instructor. Okay, but I generally do not post the solutions on the website, but I give the solution to the instructor. The instructor can help the students by telling what the solution is. Okay, and usually when I am in Vietnam, I used to grade the homeworks and give this homeworks back to the students. But when I am in the United States, the local instructor used to grade the homeworks. And similarly, the local instructor no, the midterm examination and final examination, I graded the examinations because I wanted to at least make sure how the students are doing. So the only way I know is by looking at their midterm and final examination. And I also asked the students to do a project, and the project should involve heavy duty programming. It is not just like homework programming, but a reasonable amount of programming is involved, and the topic of the project is something the student will choose. Typically 2 or 3 students will team up as a group. They choose a topic, I approve the topic, and then they take a whole semester to do the project. At the end of the semester, they present the material. And what I did was, to encourage them, I gave them a cash prize for the best project. Just take money from my pocket and said, I will give you $50 for the best term project. 50 American dollars is a lot of money when you convert that into Vietnamese currency. For me, it is not a lot of money. So for both terms, I offered that money and made it a competition so that they work with some dedication. Okay, at the end of the semester, they make their results, present their results in a oral presentation, and usually if I am there, they make the presentation in front of me. That's what happened at the end of the second semester. But at the end of the first semester, I was not there. So they made the presentation over the internet, and so I was listening it from my home, and they made their presentation, and then I evaluated them. Okay, that is how the thing. Okay, what did I learn from this experience? The first thing is this can be done. It's not impossible to teach a course across the ocean, provided you plan it carefully. Okay, it requires commitment from both sides. That means they have to be committed to come to the class regularly. They have to be committed to attend and participate in the class. Participate in the sense you have to sit down, listen to the lecture, ask some questions, do the homework, all these things. If they don't do it, and if they passively listen to the lecture and go home, they won't accomplish anything. Okay, and it requires adaptation from both sides. I have to adapt my style of doing things to suit their traditions and habits of doing things, and they have to adjust a little bit to the way that we teach in the United States and the way I teach as an individual. Okay, but we were able to adjust ourselves to these two things. And what are some of the other benefits? Other than teaching this class, they're getting a grade and so on and so forth. There are so many other benefits. For example, after the class was over, a Vietnamese delegation from the University of Science visited our campus, University of California at Davis, to explore further collaboration. Now that I know those people, I invited them about the Vice Chancellor of the university and a couple of deans and one professor came here, and I introduced them to our Chancellor and so forth, and we explored the possibility of developing some kind of a joint program. Okay. The instructor who helped me to teach my class in Vietnam, I gave her a recommendation letter and to help her to get an admission to a PhD program at the University of Denver, and right now she is at the University of Denver doing her PhD program. So for her, the benefit of participating with me is she not only came to know me, but I helped her to get a spot that she wanted to get a better education. And one of the professors with whom I collaborated, I continue to work with that professor to do a research project and on information security, cryptography, and machine learning. And actually, in a couple of months, he is coming to visit us again so that we can spend a month trying to see what else we can do in furthering this kind of research. Okay, so once you get to know the people, it's much more easy to collaborate than just talking to you over the internet. However dedicated you are, however dedicated I am, if I don't see you, if I don't interact with you, if I don't eat my lunch and breakfast with you, if I don't have a drink with you, if you don't have those things, if it is simply a lecture and you are listening, it is not going to click. You need that social dimension to make these things happen, and that thing is working out. And so as far as possible, we will continue to do this. So this more or less completes the presentation that I wanted to give. I'm stopping here and see if there are any questions. For example, if somebody wants to know the syllabus for the 2 courses that I taught, I will be happy to go over the syllabus. If not, I'm going to give all the slides, and we are going to post these slides at the IUCEE website. And so if you go to that site and see that website, you will find the syllabus that I used to teach those 2 courses. One is Introduction to Machine Learning. The other thing is Advanced Machine Learning. Okay. If you are interested, I can show you that syllabus online, but that is not the purpose of this presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to tell you how I got to go to Vietnam to teach a course, and how we tried to overcome the difficulty of distance, and how we tried to overcome the difficulty of cultural background, lack of knowledge of each other, and so forth, and able to build a collaborative enterprise. A similar thing can happen with India too, for example. It's much more easy to do this with India simply because I come from India. I lived in India until I got my bachelor's degree. So I know the Indian system well. I can communicate with Indians probably a lot more effectively than with any other culture. And probably you can also understand the way I talk and so forth much better. So this kind of a thing is a lot easier to do if Indian universities and colleges are interested. You may say, look, we don't have a State Department or somebody to fund this kind of a project. It is true. American government paid my expenses, okay? But in India, if 2 or 3 colleges combine their resources, because I'm teaching this, it doesn't cost me anything to webcast this to more than 1 college. So actually we can webcast this to 3 or 4 colleges at the same time. If each of those colleges provide a local instructor to coordinate with me, then somebody like me, it doesn't have to be me. IUCEE has about 50 experts in 50 different subject areas. Any of those experts can give topics, teach classes in areas of your choice. I'm simply telling you one experience with one particular course. That does not mean other courses cannot be taught, that does not mean other instructors cannot do it, and that does not mean other types of arrangements cannot be made. You see, what I have done is one example. We can generalize this example. We can try to adapt this example and see how we can make such a thing benefit students from India, because this way you can get advanced material from professors in the United States, and once you have this material with you, you will have the PowerPoint slides, you have the class notes, you have everything. You can even have recorded lectures. Then next time around, this local instructor who monitored this activity can go ahead and teach this class herself or himself without further prompting from the American side. So that is the whole idea. So I'll stop here and see if you have any questions.
Is the medium of instruction in Vietnam in Roman?
Okay, the medium of instruction is a very good question. Vietnamese are not very good in English. Like in India, it's much easier for me to give a lecture in English, and many of the Indian students will understand. They may not be able to talk well, they may not be able to write well, but if I speak in English, Indian students understand. The issue with Vietnamese students is they write very well. The surprising thing is they write very well, but they have a tremendous difficulty talking English. Okay, this reminds me of my own younger days when I was in high school, when I was in intermediate, even when I was in the first 2 years of engineering college. I was afraid to talk in English. I was able to write in English, read in English, but afraid to talk. And even if I talked, invariably I used to talk bad English. The Vietnamese students are very much similar to that when I was young. So I understood their problem. So we have to be patient with them. Okay, but when they write, most of them write very well. When they speak, it is very difficult for them to express well. So we ask them, I used to ask them, okay, if you cannot say it well, write it. I will explain to you. Even faculty there, they have difficulty speaking English, but they write good English. Okay, it is very similar to my own days in the 1950s and late 1950s when I was growing up in India. The quality of English we talk and write was not as good as the quality of English that I do now. Of course, I have been in this country for so long, and so I can understand Vietnamese people. They don't have an English culture. They had a French culture. They speak French better than English because French ruled them a lot longer than the Americans. Okay, I hope I answered that question. Any other question?
What are the contents of engineering education in Vietnam, for example, in electronic engineering?
Okay, the particular university I went to, it's called the University of Science. It is in Saigon. Saigon is now called Ho Chi Minh City. It's no longer called Saigon. And I was told that it is one of the best universities in the country. Okay, and I also got the impression by actually meeting the students and working with them, the students are very bright, very hardworking, and they did very well in my class. Actually, they did better than many of my students in American universities. Okay, so maybe this particular university is something like our IIT. That's what I make a guess. Another reason is Vietnam is struggling from becoming a poor country to a better country. Vietnamese students are struggling to make their life better. Okay, and so they are willing to put hard work to see that the next generation is not going to struggle as hard as they are struggling. Again, it reminds me of my own childhood. When I was growing up in India, in my childhood, there were times we didn't have enough food to eat. You won't believe it. We used to have what is called rationing. That means sometimes the amount of food grains they used to give us is not enough for one, either lunch time or dinner time, not enough for the both meals. So quite often many of us used to go hungry, go to bed hungry. It reminds me of those days that Vietnam is going through now. You know, the standard of living is relatively poor, but they are very motivated, they are working hard, they are very good students. Any other question?
Why does how mathematics is taught will matter?
Say it again. Why that?
Why how mathematics is taught will matter.
Why mathematics in starts will matter? I didn't understand.
I hope the professor can clarify the questions.
You mean in a particular machine learning class, or is it in general? I don't understand that question about mathematics, because
I hope he will clarify again. I will read the next question. He has said, okay, mathematics learning, teaching, practice, will it matter?
Oh yeah, of course. You know, I tell you, if I understand it correctly, learning and teaching mathematics, will it matter? If that is the question, it does matter a lot. You know, in the sense, although you may be a computer science student, still most of the scientific discipline heavily depends on mathematics. Okay, and so I think regardless of, even if you are a programmer, still there are several mathematical skills. The type of mathematics could be different. In computer science, we use more discrete mathematics than continuous mathematics, and sometimes we use logic more than differentiation and integration and stuff like that. But still, for example, in a course like cryptography or machine learning, you do need very high-powered mathematics. High-powered mathematics that is typically used in departments of physics and applied math and so forth. It does matter a lot. And for example, computer security is a very important field, and it is becoming a very mathematical and sophisticated techniques are being used to implement security algorithms. Okay. Any other question? I hope I answered this question.
I hope you can respond. The next question is, what are the subjects being taught under electronics engineering?
Oh, in Vietnam?
Yes.
So if it is in Vietnam, their curriculum is very similar to what we teach in the United States. Okay. You see, Vietnam, remember, it's a communist country in spite of all the things. What they are trying to do is they're trying to bring the quality of their education up, particularly the technical education, very fast, because they know that the future of their country depends upon high quality technology. Okay. To this extent, they are trying their best to improve their curriculum. They are working with countries like United States. The reason why we were there is because the Vietnamese government is interested to improve the quality of education, the quality of instruction in their classrooms, so that they don't have to depend on foreign expertise in the long run. They want to develop their own local expertise.
The professor who asked the mathematics question the mathematics question? He says, yes, you answered the question, sir. Presently,
You're talking about mathematics.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go on, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me tell you something about mathematics to give you. There is a very well-known international prize called the Wolf Prize. It is awarded every 4 years to the best mathematician during those 4 years. Okay, usually, typically it goes to a young fellow around the age of 30, 35 years old who did some outstanding work in mathematics of that. Okay, so getting a Wolf Prize is something like a Nobel Prize in mathematics. There is a Vietnamese individual who got the Wolf Prize. I don't know when he got it, recently in the last 10 years. Okay, that means they are trying to win international awards also. And to give you a comparison, recently an Indian fellow who works at Princeton University, his name is Bhargava, he also won the Wolf Prize because he did something phenomenal about Ramanujan's work. Okay, his name is Manju Bhargava. Okay, I don't want to go into that at this time, but yes, one of the Vietnamese scholars did receive a Wolf Prize. It is equivalent to a Nobel Prize.
Presently, IEEE Computer Society has certified courses. This will make global certification possible. Please comment.
Yeah, if you have IEEE certified courses, by all means, because IEEE is a very well-recognized organization, and when you say they certified it, I'm making a guess here. Probably they looked at the course content and they said, okay, this course content is good. This is contemporary, this is useful. That is what I feel is what is meant by IEEE certification. You may have excellent course content, but if you don't have an excellent instructor to deliver that content is of no good to you. Okay, so it is important the curriculum is up to date and modern. To that extent, a stamp of approval from IEEE is useful. But having the curriculum is not enough. You need people who can instruct that material well, and you need students who study that material and digest it and try to implement the knowledge they acquired in a practical application. Otherwise, there is no point in having a gold seal course that has no value. Okay, so it is important. Your curriculum approval is good from IEEE, but you need qualified instructors to teach that material, and you need dedicated students who take that material and implement that into practical applications. Otherwise, it becomes sterile. Next question.
Those are all the questions, sir.
Okay. Well, if you have any other questions, I'm going to leave the slides with Sridhar, and my Gmail address is there, my email address, rvemuri@gmail.com. You can send me some questions if you have any. I'll be happy to answer them one-on-one for you. To Srinath, I'm going to email this thing in the next few minutes, so you have this. At the end of this slide, I have a few more slides that I'm not presenting. That is the, for example, let me go to one more slide. Okay. For example, Introduction to Machine Learning syllabus. What syllabus I used for this particular course? This is the same syllabus I used to teach classes in this country. I used the same syllabus for the Vietnamese students. Then I have advanced topics in machine learning. This requires sophisticated background in mathematics to appreciate this. And I have both the syllabuses there. You can look at the syllabus to see what kind of material I taught, what kind of books I used, what kind of data sets I use, and all those things. All of this material is there. Okay, I'm going to leave all of this on the website. You are welcome to look at them. And that is my email address, rvemuri@gmail.com. Okay, if there are no more questions, So long, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot for listening to me, and wish you good luck.
Thank you very much, sir.
Bye-bye.